Hello there! If you'll recall from last episode, Innistrad is finally safe from the Eldrazi Titan Emrakul. With all of the Eldrazi Titans now dealt with, the Gatewatch is taking it easy at Jace's place on Ravnica, where, as I mentioned in the past, Jace is the living guild pact. Tamiyo has been spreading the word to other planeswalkers of the Gatewatch's existence, so now they're just waiting for someone to come to them for help with another interplanar threat. And lo and behold, 3 months after they left Innistrad, Dovin Baan of Kaladesh arrived on Ravnica to do just that. There are several things you need to know about Kaladesh before we jump into the story. First and foremost is that Kaladesh is a plane of inventors. These inventors create marvelous machines, some practical that improve the quality of life and help the city function, and plenty just for the spectacle of it. These machines are powered by a mystical substance called ether, which is basically mana that has been collected, condensed, and refined. At the time of Dovin Baan's arrival on Ravnica, a spectacular Inventors Fair was being held in the innovative center of Kaladesh, the city of Ghirapur. This festival aims to find Kaladesh's best and brightest, and see how they can channel the ether into bold new creations. The Inventors Fair is being run by the Consulate, the governing body of Ghirapur and the surrounding areas. The Consulate as a whole makes laws and issues ordinances, and its individual members, called consuls, each oversee a particular area of government. For example, Kambal, the Consul of Allocation, dictates how ether is distributed to different parts of the city. But besides for all of that stuff, the main thing you need to know about Kaladesh is that Kaladesh is the home plane of Chandra Nalaar. As a quick side note here, I have in the past pronounced it Chandra, but apparently it is indeed Chandra, as referenced here in this trailer clip.
My name is Chandra Nalaar.
So there you go, I will be pronouncing it Chandra from now on. Chandra was the daughter of two inventors, Pia and Kiran Nalaar, and when she was a little girl, she worked as an illegal ether smuggler for them and their inventor friends. During one particular skirmish with Consulate police, Chandra's fear and rage caused her innate pyromancy abilities to awaken. Mages are a pretty big no-no on Kaladesh, as when someone doesn't need ether to use their abilities, the Consulate can't control them. So, fearing persecution, the Nalaar family fled Ghirapur. Kiran even built his daughter a vent pack to help her contain her unpredictable powers. But as the three were moving from village to village, Consulate forces caught wind of them at the village of Bunarat. The chief of compliance Baral was instructed to not go after them, and only apprehend them if they came back to Ghirapur. But Baral, holding some sort of grudge against mages, ignored his orders, and led a team of Consulate peacemakers to the Nalaar's location. Chandra tried to give herself up, so that her parents and the people of Bunarat may go free. But Baral instead had his men set fire to the thatched roofs of the village's huts, with the intent to blame Chandra. Baral himself killed Chandra's father, and all that Chandra found of her mother was a singed shawl. Chandra couldn't even fight back due to her father's vent pack. They took Chandra back to Ghirapur to be publicly executed for the crimes she committed. But just as Baral himself was about to swing the executioner's blade, Chandra exploded in an inferno of fury, breaking through the stifling vent pack and igniting her planeswalker spark. She was whisked away to the plane of Regatha, where she was found by monks from Carol Keep, a pyromancy practicing temple founded by the famed planeswalker Jaya Ballard. There, she was taken in as a student and learned to master her powers, and the rest is history. But yeah, all in all, Kaladesh is a pretty emotional place for Chandra, and Chandra doesn't exactly do well with emotions, usually just burns them. Anyway, back to the present. Dovin Baan arrived on Ravnica as a representative of the Consulate, with a simple request. Dovin was a Vedalken planeswalker with an impressive eye for perfection. Vedalken, by the way, are a race of blue-skinned humanoids only native to select planes. Vedalken differ from plane to plane, but the constants are the blue skin and the bald heads. Kaladesh Vedalken, for example, have 6 fingers. But that's not important. What is important is that Dovin Baan wanted the Gatewatch's help defending the aforementioned Inventors Fair from some renegades he feared would interrupt and sabotage fair activities. Jace and Gideon, uncertain of which of them had the final say in decisions like this, were uncertain how to respond, but Liliana was able to concisely explain that the Gatewatch was founded to protect against interplanar threats, like those presented by planeswalkers and other interplanar beings. The renegade issue sounded like an internal affair, so their hands were tied. In either way, Jace in particular was in no position to be helping anybody, as his excursions to Zendikar and Innistrad left him bogged down with quite a lot of backlogged paperwork. Not to mention, he had been busy trying to locate the Gorgon planeswalker Vraska, who had been going around and petrifying various officials of the Azorius Guild. With his request denied, Dovin prepared to depart back to Kaladesh, but was invited to stay for dinner by Gideon. Chandra, furious she had to remain in the vicinity of a member of the Consulate for more than 5 seconds, went to Nissa for help in calming and centering herself, as that sort of stuff is right up Nissa's alley. But being the emotional fireball that she was, Chandra managed to embarrass herself and ran off. At dinner with Dovin, which, by the way, sounds like an excellent name for a television show, the group noticed that Chandra and Liliana were conspicuously absent. Upon hearing the name Chandra Nalaar, Dovin divulged the events of years past. But surely someone with that sort of criminal history would have to be incredibly rash to just return to Kaladesh on a whim like that. Naturally, the Gatewatch knew that that meant Chandra had returned to Kaladesh on a whim like that. Jace was busy being the law incarnate, and Gideon really didn't want to be the person to have to tell Chandra what to do, so Nissa volunteered to follow Dovin back to Kaladesh to find Chandra. And Liliana. Once on Kaladesh, Chandra wanted to seek out the leader of the Renegades, in hopes of protecting them from, and supporting their efforts against, the Consulate that killed her parents. Liliana, who had indeed followed Chandra, tried to convince her to just have some fun at the fair and simmer down. But apparently, the 2-century-old necromancer's idea of fun was antagonizing police by saying that the two were Renegade sympathizers. After fleeing for a while, as those being chased by police are wont to do, Liliana spotted a remarkably suspicious hooded man in a crowd. They followed, assuming he could be with the Renegades. When the man reached his destination, however, the Planeswalkers were met with 2 familiar faces. The first was Tezzeret, the man in the robe. He was an old ally of Liliana's, the former head of an interplanar crime syndicate based on Ravnica, a pawn of Nicol Bolas, and a master of artifice magic. There's a lot of backstory between him, Liliana, and Jace that I really don't have time to get into right now, but just know that this is not a good fella. Tezzeret, apparently working as head judge of the Inventors Fair, had been tracking the Renegade leader himself, and his investigation led him to none other than Pia Nalaar, Chandra's mother. As it turns out, she didn't die in the Consulate's attack all those years ago. She was captured. After she escaped custody, and with her husband and daughter both gone, Pia devoted her life to fighting the Consulate, and worked to gather others to do the same. As this fateful meeting occurred, Dovin and Nissa showed up, having tracked down Chandra, and with peacemakers in tow. The peacemakers surrounded Pia, forming a wall between her, Tezzeret, and Dovin, and Chandra, Nissa, and Liliana. This provoked Chandra to attack, which immediately prompted Dovin to command the peacemakers to arrest her. Not wanting her daughter in Consulate hands again, Pia distracted Dovin and the peacemakers by turning herself in as Renegade Prime, the leader of the Renegades, and assaulting the officer arresting her, just for good measure. In the ensuing chaos this caused, Liliana called for her allies to make their retreat, much to Chandra's dismay. Once safe, Liliana went back to Ravnica to consult with Jace. She knew how dangerous Tezzeret was, and knew that his presence on this plane can't have been a random coincidence. Nissa was happy to see her go, angered once she realized Liliana had been provoking Chandra's temper all this time. Chandra and Nissa were lost on how to proceed, but Chandra knew that she needed to rescue her mother. Fortunately for them, the two were almost immediately found by Ovia Pashiri, an old family friend of the Nalaars. Ovia didn't know where Pia was being held, but she knew where they could find out. And so, the trio proceeded to the house party of Aetherborn socialite Yahenni. Aetherborn are mysterious, agendered humanoids that are born out of the ether refining process. While no one knows how one is really born, what is known is that they live very short lives, typically a few months to a few years. They thus always try to make the most out of life, exemplifying hedonism. Wealthy ones, like Yahenni, often throw extravagant parties that are truly events to behold. Yahenni was in the process of throwing their pre-penultimate party, the party before the party to be held when they're expecting to die. Anyway, while Yahenni was unable to supply info on Pia's location, they were able to talk to Nissa and make her more comfortable in this city that was so very far from nature. Aetherborn can sense emotions, so Nissa finally had someone to talk to who could read her well. After a while, a consulate enforcer showed up at the party with intentions to apprehend a criminal who was hiding out there. This was actually a lucky break, as Nissa was able to subdue the officer, and Yahenni was able to coerce from him the information they needed. Pia was being held at Dund Prison, the airtight lockup where none other than Captain Baral himself was stationed. So, Chandra, Nissa, and Mrs. Pashiri headed to the secret/not-so-secret night market of the Aetherborn crime lord Gonti. Rumor had it that Dund Prison laid beneath the night market, so it was their best lead. While they were unable to secure the location of the entrance directly, Nissa realized she could sense the ether pipelines beneath their feet, much like how she senses mana ley lines. She, despite Chandra's constant and frantic agitation, managed to lead them to an entrance, although they weren't exactly subtle about getting in, what with Chandra being Chandra. This entrance opened to a system of underground tunnels, in which Nissa found herself still able to follow the underground pipelines and infer where Pia might be. This task was not made easier by Chandra's temper flare-ups. I'm noticing a theme here. Anyway, before the trio could find Pia, they were cornered by Baral and his forces, who were clearly anticipating their arrival. Thanks, Chandra. They tried to escape, but Baral, unbeknownst to them, was actually, and hypocritically, a mage himself and a master of counter magic. He was easily able to cancel their abilities, subdue them, and throw them in a magic-proof airtight cell that he had set up to slowly fill with poison. Fun, right? Nissa and Chandra couldn't break through the door, and while they could have planeswalked away, Chandra refused to leave Mrs. Bashiri, and Nissa refused to leave Chandra. Luckily for them, an unexpected ally showed up to save the day. That ally was Ajani Goldmane, a Leonin planeswalker, an albino, one-eyed cat person from Naya on the plane of Alara. He was a pacifist warrior, so to speak, refusing to kill when it can be avoided. Like Batman, I guess, but furrier. He was actually a member of Tamiyo's Planeswalker Story Circle on Kamigawa, one of the outlets that Tamiyo had used to spread word of the Gatewatch. The most recent time he had been to Kamigawa, shortly before Tamiyo had departed for Innistrad, Ajani had met Nashi, a young ratfolk Tamiyo had adopted. Nashi's village had been burned to the ground by Tezzeret 3 years ago. Shortly after that event, and for unrelated reasons, Tezzeret was betrayed by his allies, Jace in particular, and was believed to have been killed. But while that was 3 years ago, Ajani had heard of Tezzeret from his recently deceased ally Elspeth, about how he had been working with her enemies on the plane of Mirrodin, and that was only 2 years prior. As it turns out, in their duel, Jace had wrecked Tezzeret's mind and cut off his metal arm, leaving him mangled and brain-dead, but alive. The planeswalker Nicol Bolas had actually bargained for his body and taken it away. Bolas restored and altered Tezzeret's mind and granted him a new arm, crafting him into the perfect planeswalker servant. Tezzeret owed his life to the Elder Dragon, and the tattoos on Tezzeret's forehead were given by Bolas as an eternal reminder of just that. After the revelation that Tezzeret was still alive and kicking, Ajani knew that he had to be stopped, no matter what his current schemes were. If he was working for Bolas, he was a threat. Thus, Ajani had been working with Mrs. Bashiri and the Renegades of Kaladesh to take him down. When Mrs. Bashiri was apprehended, Ajani was able to find her through a network of renegade informants, and managed to rescue the trio from their poison prison. He expelled the poison from their lungs with his healing magic, and they escaped Dun Prison alive and intact. It wasn't difficult for them to find Pia or Tezzeret once they were out. It was being advertised as the duel of the century, come one, come all. A duel between head judge Tezzeret and renegade prime Pia Nalaar. Chandra, Nissa, and Ajani met up with Liliana, who had returned from Ravnica with Jason Gideon in tow. In the very arena in which Chandra had been set to be executed 12 years ago, Pia and Tezzeret began their face-off. Each had scraps of metal to work with to try to quicksmith machines to kill each other. Pia, as a skilled inventor, fought valiantly, but Tezzeret with his artifice magic wasn't exactly playing fair. This wasn't meant to be a showdown. It was an execution. But the Gatewatch and Ajani stepped in, of course, saving Pia, but unfortunately not apprehending Tezzeret, who made his getaway on a consulate flagship. At last, however, Chandra was reunited with her mother. But the celebration didn't last long, as Kaladeshi planeswalker Saheeli Rai arrived at the arena with some devastating news. All of the inventions of the fair were gone. The duel had just been bait to distract the planeswalkers from stopping consulate forces from seizing all of the inventions and kidnapping the finalists of the fair's competition. Tezzeret was building something. Dovin Bond, meanwhile, finding Tezzeret's plan to be exceedingly sloppy and, at least from his point of view, completely unnecessary, tried to prevent riots from breaking out. Tezzeret, now safely in the consulate spire, told Bond that if he could restore peace to the city, he could oversee the analysis of the confiscated inventions. Save one. There was one machine, a matter teleporter made by Saheeli's friend Rajmi, that Tezzeret wanted for himself. With newfound purpose, Dovin Bond returned to the streets and did his best to suppress the hundreds of outraged inventors, implementing a new set of consulate ordinances to ensure safety. And at last, Tezzeret was left to his devices. Literally, in this case. Thank you all so much for watching. Well, this has been a doozy of an episode, hasn't it? Longest one yet. As per usual, sorry for my absence. I'd really like to keep a consistent schedule of any sort, but this is just a hobby for me, and real life takes priority. Not to mention, this has been a hectic year for Magic's story, what with the mediocre War of the Spark novel, War of the Spark's prequel, The Gathering Storm, coming out after War of the Spark, the travesty that was Forsaken, the lack of a story for Theros, and the mismatch between Ikoria's cards and the novella. But anyway, I'm so glad to finally get this out. I've had the script written for ages. I can finally move on. I've had a lot more time recently due to current world affairs, so I'll tentatively give a 1 or 2 month time frame for the next one. I'll give myself a big pat on the back and a high five if I can hit that one. As a reminder, you can always find the stories I base these videos off of at magic.wizards.com/story. In particular this time around, I recommend the first story, Homesick, because it's cute to see the Gatewatch interact in day-to-day life, and also Release, the 7th story, about a Johnny. That one's one of my favorite stories I've ever posted. To close out, please leave any feedback you have in the comments below. Like, subscribe, and all that jazz. Thank you for watching, and God's willing, see you soon.